chat in publishing. And I want to first thank both our presenters. We're lucky to have Ashley Runyon, and Ashley is actually on the screen right now in red, and she works for the UK Press. And then we also have Danica Isdell, and she works at Sarah Van Books in Louisville. So we're excited to have both of you, and I appreciate your joining us today. What we're going to do is have each of them talk a little bit in general about the field of publishing, maybe give some tips for getting into the field, that kind of thing. And then at the end, we'll leave some questions for you guys. Sound good? Ashley, it's all yours.
Sure. I'm Ashley Runyon. I'm the Senior Acquisitions Editor at the University Press of Kentucky. And even though we are based at UK, we actually are a consortium of most of the colleges and universities in Kentucky. So Center is part of our consortium. We have representatives from each of those schools who make up our editorial board. We are an academic press, so everything that is either submitted to us or we go out and acquire has to go out for peer review. So that is a lot of my job. I'm an acquiring editor, and I handle our regional list. So I handle all of the Kentucky and Appalachian Studies projects. So a lot of those are academic, but I also handle the regional trade. So I handle anything that has to do with food or travel. We do about 60 books a year. About 58 of those are nonfiction, and we only do 2 fiction books a year. So, but I do handle the fiction list, and Lisa Williams, who's actually here in English, is our series editor for the Center series, which is sponsored by Center, actually. And we just went through and had our selections for this year for the fiction submissions that we do. So when we get a project, we get about 2,000 submissions a year. And like I said, we only do 60 books, so there's a lot of rejecting that goes on at the press, but I also do, as the regional trade editor, go out and try to solicit individuals to come and do books for us. One of our big money makers is our bourbon list. Since Kentucky, has a lot of bourbon heritage, we have numerous books on bourbon, and so that's something that I usually go out and try to get individuals who are knowledgeable about the area or might be a writer in the area to come and do a book with us. Like I said, everything has to go out for peer review. For academic publications, that would go to usually a professor who's knowledgeable or has written in the area before. But for the trade books, it's usually somebody who's not a professor, somebody who's not an academic. So it might be, a newspaper writer who specializes in food, or sometimes we even have chefs that might be popular, or someone who we feel like is very knowledgeable about the area. And then I present the projects to our editorial board. We have 4 meetings of those a year, and they ultimately have approval of the projects that we do. And so after that, I'm able to offer individuals a contract and kind of shepherd them through the publishing process. I kind of fell into publishing. I think I actually worked at the press when I was a student at UK, and I left to go to grad school and then ended up coming back several years later. A lot of we have a very strong internship program, and I would say, whether it would be with an academic press or another one, I think if you really are interested in getting into publishing, you can have the degrees, but lots of people have the degrees. Having the experience is what is really good to have, and I think there is a little bit of luck in there, who being able to, if you've worked with somebody and really had a good experience with them, being able to go on and doing either another internship or a paid gig after that is really the way to go. We've had several Center interns that come in. I actually had one a couple years ago who, after she did a summer with us, went on and did the next summer at Yale University Press, which is obviously a lot larger than we are. And so I would highly recommend, if that's something that you want on the book side of publishing, to be able to do that. I personally I worked for the Lexington Herald Leader for a while, and I also worked for 2 different magazines. So I think, having experience in any form of publishing is helpful when you're transitioning, whether that be books or magazines or newspapers or kind of whatever it is that you want to have. Having portfolio pieces is definitely helpful. Obviously, it's good, if you have academic papers that you've done at school, but really having something, whether it's even just a press release or some sort of jacket or catalog copy that was done at a press, taking that to a future employer and being able to show them, hey, this is what I've done. I've not just had it in the classroom. I've had experience hands-on would be very helpful. So is that enough for now, or do you want me to keep going, or you want to have Danica talk for a little bit?
We'll leave the time for questions, so.
Okay.
We'll let Danica jump in here now.
Okay, I'll try to add to her little talk because that was really good. So I am the publishing assistant at Saraband Books, and I started off as an intern here. Last summer was my internship, and I got hired part-time, then full-time. So speaking of internships, Saraband also has a really great internship program. I highly suggest internships. And even before your internships, I suggest getting into publishing. I mean, Vantage Point is a publication. Get involved in that as soon as you can. If you haven't been able to, it's never too late. The newspaper, the Cento, get involved in that. Any kind of resource you can get where you can understand the language, understand the computer softwares, anything like that's going to be a huge advantage to you. And even though these things might seem like small scale, small deals at Center because Center's so small, et cetera, knowing that that's something on your resume and that's something that people really look for, like I really do highly encourage that. A little bit about Saraband. We are not an academic publisher. We're a small nonprofit independent publisher. We publish collections of poetry, fiction, and essays, like lyric essays, not academic essays. And we publish about 10 books a year. This year we published 12, which was kind of a big year for us. Next year we're publishing 9. We moved one of the books up. But so that's a little bit about Saraband. We do a lot of Kentucky authors. So once a year there's a Bruckheimer contest for Kentucky writers or manuscripts on Kentucky subject. And so we do publish local things as well as more national or global authors and works. Yeah, I guess, I get a lot of emails from students, from Center students, from students from everywhere asking, what advice can I give them? And I always tell them, on top of the internship and, getting involved in your college publications, take computer science. Take computer science, even if it's just an intro. I did, and it helped enormously. It's English majors and creative writing majors and writers in general are very good at computer science. It's a language. It's easy to learn, and it really will give you that extra knowledge that goes beyond reading a lot of books. That being said, read a lot of contemporary books. We get a lot of people and students who apply who have a great understanding of 19th century or medieval literature. That's wonderful. But knowing what is happening in the current literary community is so much more useful in publishing. Because if you want to work in a literary press, and that was my goal, really being involved in what authors are reading, what they're writing, what social community they're involved with, who they're in conversation with. That's something that you don't always learn in your prereq or your 300 level classes. So yeah, that's one of the things that I, as much as Lisa and Moody really helped me with that when I was at Center, I had to double up on the contemporary literature that I was reading. As soon as I started my internship, I realized, I gotta catch up. So yeah, I guess that's on top of everything that she said. So yeah.
Yeah, if I could just chime in on what she said about the computer aspect of it, I think it's very important too. I would recommend, if you can get knowledgeable about Photoshop or InDesign, very few editors now only deal with, text or being able to go through a manuscript and see, what changes they're going to have that on a daily basis, particularly when you're starting out. You're going to be going through, if there's images in a book, you're going to be able to need to know, are they high enough quality? Are they going to be able to be reproduced when I send it to production? And when you're getting into larger publishers, editing and production are usually, a combined department. And so you're not just going to be going through and doing editing. You're going to be going through and working on a lot about, let's put this book together and make it look like something good and not just a Word document.
Exactly. There's a really great resource called Skillshare.com. It's just a website. I think some of the videos and lessons are free, but I think for some of them you have to get a membership or subscription to. I highly recommend it. It will teach you how to use all of the InDesign, Photoshop, all that stuff. That's how I learned. I mean, on top of trial and error with Vantage Point back in the day, I think Skillshare is really where I was able to refine those skills.
Skillshare, is that what it was?
Skillshare, so it's SKILLSHARE.com.
Thank you. Do they have questions? No?
I mean, I'm wondering, like, Annika, what are you reading right now then? Like, it's kind of hard to break into those contemporary authors sometimes if you don't have an idea, but I'm wondering what you're reading. Like,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. You can go for it. Well, what are you reading right now?
Oh, what am I reading right now? Recently, I've been reading a lot of manuscripts, just because we're in one of our submission seasons. But oh gosh, so I'm trying to think of like the last non-Sarah Band manuscript that I read. I actually did. This is going to completely contradict what I just told you. I read F. Scott Fitzgerald's Tender
Tender as the Night?
Tender as the Night.
Yes. So I'm breaking my own advice, obviously. But that's the last book I read. I really want to read more Mary Ruefle. Sarah Band's publishing a chapbook by her. She's an essayist and poet and maybe fiction writer as well. She's spectacular. So I sometimes when we get new established, when they're new to us, but they're already established elsewhere in other publishers, I like to read their backlist. So Mary Ruefle, really want to read more of her. And then also Joan Didion, got to read her. I have a book sitting on my coffee table that I just got from the Women's Writers Conference in Lexington a few weeks ago by Ann Beattie. It's the New York Times collection.
I highly recommend her as well.
So I'm very excited about that book. So.
How did both of you get into the positions that you're in now? Like, how did you, one of you said it's a lot of who you know, but I was wondering, like, how did you guys actually get where you are?
Well, I interned about 14 years ago at the press. I stayed there for about a year and a half and then left to go to grad school, like I mentioned, and I worked at a newspaper and then a magazine. And then a position actually came open in our marketing department. And some of the individuals there let me know that the position was open. And so I actually started out doing advertising, direct mail exhibits, and running the website. And so going back to, having computer skills, Dreamweaver is also a great thing to learn how to do because, when you are editing, if you don't end up at a book publisher, let's say that you're working, doing writing for a website, you're going to have to know, how do I get that content up on the web? So I worked in marketing for about 2 years, and then about 5 years ago, the regional acquisitions editor position came open, and the director approached me to come down to that position, and I handled development with that as well. And then last year I was promoted to senior editor. So it really was kind of, I never dreamed that I would end up in acquisitions. It was more of a, over time, I started in marketing, and the experience that you have, sometimes it's not all about the degree that you have, it's the information that you learn along the way, being able to really kind of become a professional in that situation. So I would say the people that can be from being in an internship that you were before, having those contacts that it may not even be at the same publishing company that you interned, but if you can have those as references, we give references a lot to individuals who used to work where we work, who are now applying at other presses, other academic presses, but also, Penguin or Random House or some of the larger trade publishers as well.
So I'm a 2014 grad, so I'm not nearly as evolved in my publishing career as Ashley, but so I as well started as an intern at Saraband, and from there, while I was interning, it was really, the stars aligned. I was really good with InDesign and Photoshop, and so I was able to give them a skill that I could then kind of sell to be the assistant beyond the internship. And then from there, Saraband's a really small staff. We have 5, including me, 5 staff members. So it really worked out that the books that we're publishing here and what I have to give back to Saraband really matched what Saraband needed at that time. So it was very lucky. I'm a very fortunate person to met the situation. But I think that, that's one of the things that really keep your eyes open for is know what a company needs. When you start your internship or when you go to do a part-time job or something, really have a big picture in your head of what they are and what their mission is, and see how you can fit in a longer term situation. I've never, and this might be a fault at some point. It's working out now, but I'm very far seer. I want to find a place and stay and never leave. So that's kind of how I've arranged my career strategy, I guess. So yeah, I've only been doing this for about 1.5 years, so I can't speak to super long term, but yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So for people who outside of being singer do have, let's say, because I do work with.
I'm sorry, can you say it again? I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry. Okay, so I do work with Vantage Point, so I have that editing or that literary connection there. But for people that have difficulty finding those internships outside of the campus activities that you do that is for publishing, how would you suggest going about that? Because you guys seem to be alluding to knowing people is definitely one way to go. But if you don't have those connections, how would you go about building those connections so you can have at least 1 foot in the door to get to that position, even if it's just for an internship?
Well, I think doing a lot of events. Danica had mentioned the Kentucky Women Writers Conference. I noticed it's mostly women in there. That is a wonderful resource. We actually, our director just accepted the position of director at Notre Dame Press, but his wife, Julie Wren, is in charge of the Kentucky Women Writers Conference, and that's going to have a lot of individuals who are going to have a lot of connections, not only in the region, but nationally. Having connections in the publishing industry can also be having connections to writers. So, if there's individuals that you can, become networking with, and I kind of hate the word networking because it really needs to kind of happen naturally. You meet individuals, kind of tell them. Most people are really helpful when you say, here's my goals, who's somebody that I should know about. So I'd say, going to a writing conference like that, if it is more on the writing side that you're interested in, the Appalachian Writers Workshop is based in Hindman, and it is all-star of every big Kentucky and Appalachian writer that there is. It's out in the country. I actually go every year, and they have big writers. Silas House is always a teacher there, so they actually sit down with you on a daily basis, go through your writing, kind of talk about what do you want to do for if you wanted to get into publishing, who are the connections that you would have. So if you can't do the internships, I would say do as much as you can on campus, and then try to go to these conferences that may just be a couple days. And so if you could make a trip to Lexington or Cincinnati to meet some individuals, and I know it's kind of silly, but I'd even make up business cards, even at your age, to kind of talk about, here's my information, this is how I want to get into publishing, what are some opportunities that because I would say, there's a little bit of luck, but a lot of it is the connections that you have and who can give you a good recommendation. I have been on probably a dozen hiring committees at the press since I have worked there, and I will say, I don't know that we've hired anyone that we didn't have a good recommendation of someone who, either we knew personally or we knew of by reputation, giving them, saying, this is a great person to hire, or someone that we'd already had working for us as an intern and we brought in because we knew they were really good.
Yeah, I would second that conference thing, because the way I got into Sarah, I completely missed the internship application period. But I was going to AWP, which is the huge national writing conference. And that's when I stopped at Sarah's booth because I knew they were in Louisville. And I said, hey, I would love to internship. I would love to be your intern. What do you want from me? I will give you anything. And I started emailing the president here, Sarah Gorham, and couple days later, I was called in for an interview, and after that, I got it. Even if you don't have a foot in the door right now, you can make yourself visible and just start talking to people. It seems kind of awkward at first, but once you start just putting yourself out there and going to readings and just chatting with the people at booths at conferences, or it really is kind of a put yourself out there kind of situation, but it works. if you're well spoken and about, I would also recommend, if you go up to a press at a conference, or if you want to meet people, know a little bit about what they do first. With Saraband, I knew some of the work that they had published. I think that's a really great way to start talking to them too, is especially if you're going to readings or a conference, know about what the author has published, know about what the publisher has published, and kind of get an understanding of where your common ground is with these people, because being knowledgeable about them will be a foot in the door already, so yeah, conferences are magical places. Yeah.
I kind of have a question to add related to that. Are there any trade associations or trade journals for publishing that are worthwhile that could help what's going on in the field, or even have some regional I guess, reach, so you would know, oh, I've read about that publisher, they do the essays, or, you know.
Publishers Weekly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. We have, for university presses, there's the AAUP, which is the Association of American University Presses. And so we go to the meetings for that each year. I just went to Denver this past summer for that. But I would say it's a more closed off networking. You kind of already have to be in there to get your foot in the door. Obviously, Publishers Weekly. There is mediajobs.com. I mean, that's something that, you know, you have lots of people in the book and newspaper industry. And the newspaper industry is, I would recommend, you know, I don't know that you necessarily want to work for a newspaper with everything going on, but things have changed. And so there's a lot of like online publishing we do, particularly from our marketing department. We have press releases that go to thousands of blogs and other websites. And those are a great start to maybe being able to get your foot in the door and getting some pieces that you can take to a larger publisher later on down the road.
Yeah, I think for us, since we're more towards the literary side, Publishers Weekly kind of covers it. There's always the I also recommend following a lot of publishers on Twitter, because you get a lot of different news from different sources there. And like there are recently a few scandals going on with Red Hen Press and with Sherman Alexie's the book that he just edited, the anthology. I forgot, but there was basically a white guy used a Chinese name, and there was a scandal happening with that, and it's all very reality TV, but it's I think it's fun. So yeah, follow people on Twitter. You'll let other people do the work for you. Let them gather, and it's free. You don't have to pay for it. So yeah, those are kind of where we get our info.
Yeah, go ahead. You kind of.
So, I mean, talking about like the newspaper industry and all that, like now there are more independent ways to publish in a way. So like Amazon, you can publish books through Amazon, or like I just found this, like Apple has an app that like lets you sort of do InDesign on your own without actually learning InDesign, and then I guess that could lead to actual publishing something. And so like how is the publishing industry responding to like a lot of these like electronic ways of publishing, where like it's independent publishers?
From my perspective, I think, you know, I don't know if any of you all have seen The Martian. The story behind that book is kind of fascinating because the guy, Andy Weir, who wrote the book, he had gone to tons of trade publishers and tried to get the book published before he was able to, and he couldn't find anybody to take the book, and so he self-pubbed it. And it got a lot of really good reviews. It got a lot of motion behind it, and then he got picked up by a trade publisher, and now there's a huge movie with Matt Damon. I would say that is a 1 in 10 million story. From my perspective, I think, you know, getting out there and doing publishing, particularly when you have a good reputation, it has helped us in some ways. Because, you know, being able to have something, particularly with an academic press, and I think also for literary, kind of having individuals who are professionals and knowledgeable about the area, vetting these publications, it has a little bit more prestige to be with a good press now in publishing. You can publish yourself. You definitely can. I think it's very hard. I've had a lot of authors who, you know, have come to us and have done another book. And it's more than just being able to, you know, write the book or being able to make it look pretty on CreateSpace. How are you going to get it distributed outside of Amazon? How are you going to get a press release to media venues to pick it up and do a book review? So I think, you know, the publishing industry has I've been at the press 8 years now. And so in the time that I've been there, the way we do everything has completely changed. And so I'd say, when we started, we were doing ebooks, but they weren't a huge portion of our sales. But the way that we print the books, the way that we review them, the way that we distribute them, the way that we market them is different. But that's kind of a side thing of what you were saying. But I think there's really a great market out there for people who are wanting to self-publish, but I don't think that it is necessarily affecting, publishers who have a good reputation and people wanting to have that name behind their publication. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I get the self-publishing question a lot, and one thing that I like to answer with is, it takes 5 people to publish a book successfully here, and we only do that 10 times a year. And it's a huge, if you want something published on this level of expertise, it takes not only, 5 people's worth of time, but also a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we do ebooks as well, but we always publish a physical copy of the book. That takes money. It's not just in the cyberspace. It's an actual object that you have to pay to have made. So that's one of the things that I always that comes up in the self-publishing discussion, is that people think if they self-publish, they get more royalties, they get a higher cut of everything if it sells. And if you have something to sell, that's part of our job is to do that, but also with a lot of expertise behind us. When you self-publish for the first time, that will be your first book ever putting out there. It's not our first book. This is not our first rodeo. So I think that there's, on top of the kind of curator feel of a press, there's also that the expertise that is a little bit forgotten in this DIY world. Now, if you can do that, if you have all the skills and you know how to work it all and get it well published, then, be your own publisher. But understand what you're not getting by not using a publisher.
Any other questions? Thinking hard? I've got a question, just that maybe this is helpful to some of the people. And you guys have touched on this a little bit, but if you were to summarize the key traits and skills that you look for somebody you're hiring, how would you, condense that?
I would say, I think we have touched on, the computer skills, well-rounded. It is very rare, I think, in the publishing industry that you do one thing. I'd say, a lot of people come in and say, I want to be a copy editor. Well, that's great, but you're probably going to have to start out being an editorial assistant. And so with that comes the need to, go through a manuscript and see what's wrong with it, being able to edit it, being able to, put call outs for images and being able to do Photoshop with those images and maybe laying out something in InDesign. So I'd say the more you don't have to, and as an acquisitions editor, I always say, I know a little bit about a lot of things. You don't have to be an expert in InDesign. You don't have to be an expert in Photoshop, but being able to have those skills and being willing to really, going out and learning some more, I think is good. And you're only going to be an expert by doing it over time. And I don't think anyone who is hiring you expects you to be, but the more skills that you have, the more applicable you are, and the more, the more we like you when we see you on a resume or on a cover letter. And kind of going back to doing a cover letter, and I think Danica had talked about it before, knowing more about who you are. And so I kind of think that, when you send a cover letter, it's very similar to when people submit a manuscript to me. If it says, "Dear editor, I'd like to be able to publish this manuscript with you," and it says, they didn't even take the time to find out my name or to, find out anything about the press, the likelihood of me really taking a closer look at that is very small. Whereas, if you show me that, you've done your time and you've done your research, and don't just apply for every job out there, apply and take the time to, really do the ones that are interesting to you.
Yeah, totally agree. If if you decide to apply somewhere and they decide to hire you on a generic cover letter, that kind of says something. So, really be aware of where you're trying to go. As far as what we look for, well-rounded is a great way, because we have 5 people here. We are always in each other's business. There is not an email that goes around where I'm not asked, even if it's just briefly, what my take on this story is, or, I work pretty closely with the development director here, and I've been really looking at some different strategies for campaigns with her. And so knowing that even though a publisher takes marketing, production, development in some cases, acquisitions, editorial, know that at any moment you could go anywhere, and being able to be flexible and
a lot of times that's how you get promoted, because your boss's job might not be the one that's open, but a higher level job in a different department. If you've shown that you can be well-rounded and adjusting, that's how you move on, and that's how you get promoted.
Exactly. So a little bit about a lot of things, even if it's not specifically about publishing. So if you know a little bit about marketing, that's great. If you know how to apply it to publishing after that, that's really good. So stuff like that. And then, of course, being, a good literary citizen, knowing what authors are publishing and being on top of the books that are out and what people are saying about them. So, because one of the best pieces of advice as far as, once you're past the resume stage, having something to talk about and having an opinion about what's happening in the literary world is very indicative of how committed you are to being in publishing.
Any other questions? You guys have any final thoughts or parting thoughts? It's been a lot of good information from my standpoint.
Yeah. You can do it.
That's always good to hear.
If you need help, I'm here.
Yeah, me too. I think both of us mentioned our internship programs. Even if it's not something that you want to necessarily come and intern with us, I'd be more than happy to, give my information, particularly once you're connected, a lot of people, a lot of different publishers, and being able to have those contacts is helpful for other individuals who are looking for internships as well.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much. This has been a lot.
Great, thank you.
Good information.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody want to go pizza?
Where can we get their Where can we get their contact information?
Really, I can do it. Actually, you take class.
Right, straight. I'll leave it with that.
Yeah. And it's Sarah Van Brooks.
Yes.
Right. I probably mentioned, hey, I was in that. All right, guys. Thanks for coming.
I have to do my designated points through. Okay, so let me try to.
Yeah, literally. I might do a fall or spring internship before I go to class.
Both of you.
I reached that pen with me.
I feel like at that point, no. I practiced it.
Well, I had one out, but I thought it was like on my right.
I started off, it's been like 45 minutes and already. So it's 10 minutes. Good. Yeah, well, 40 minutes, I gotta go see. Sorry, I think that.